This conference will now be recorded.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Behind the Mask with a Hospitality Leader, where today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Kate Nicholls, CEO of UK Hospitality. Kate, how are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, I'm very, very good. Another day closer in this countdown. So, Kate, just to start with, I just want to say hats off in regarding all your team's effort of late. And of course, you know, while there's a long way to go, there's certainly a much better focus point for so many. A bit personal, and I hope you don't mind, but, you know, dare I ask what the last 12 months has been like for you personally, with the responsibility of a huge industry on your shoulders? How's it been?
Exhausting, exhilarating. I think you probably describe it as a roller coaster, but it's actually been longer than 12 months. So our first meeting that we had with the government about COVID was the 28th of January last year. And we've since then not exclusively dealing with COVID, obviously, in those early days, but actually there was a steady drumbeat from 28th of January where it was what do we do? How do we need to equip the industry? What kind of support are we going to need when this hits us, not if? Now, at those early stages, we were just thinking it was a short period of time. Never in my wildest dreams thought we were going to be locked down and have to have the catastrophic situation that we had. But we were talking to government then, and I think it's those initial immediate hard yards from 28th of January right the way through to the 16th of March, which is when the Prime Minister stood up and said, don't go to pubs and bars. That's where it really paid dividends, and so we have been flat out. It has definitely been a marathon, not a sprint, but it's been a marathon with sprints in between times. And I think in lobbying and in sort of public affairs, what you're trying to do is to make a really bad situation a little less bad. And I think, you know, this is one area that you can point to. Without that hard work by my team, without that resilience, and the continued pressure on government from the 28th of January right the way through to today to get hospitality in front of them, to get the consideration, we would be in an immeasurably worse place had my team not worked flat out throughout that period, and we would have seen a catastrophic slide. So 14 major financial statements later, hospitality front and center. I think all of us in my team are looking forward to being able to have a few days off, because we haven't had any since January last year.
Must have been relentless. I didn't realise, Kate, that those conversations started in January, and so obviously that run up.
It has been relentless, and I think it's because, as you rightly said in the question, we've had the responsibility of an industry on our shoulders. You know, every time I've stood up since then, talking to a minister, talking to the media, it is with that knowledge that there are 3.2 million people working in the industry, a couple of million more in our supply chain, who are dependent on us doing that good job. And so, you know, that's what's kept us going all the way through, is that the responsibility. It hasn't been a weight of responsibility. It's been an honour and a privilege to do it and to be that voice, get a good deal for them.
Oh, wow, what an incredible motivation. And I think, yeah, you know, as a supplier and for all operators, you know, to your team as well, it's with a big thanks. I mean, in regards to, you know, there's been a lot of talk about, and you'll be had talks in regards to, you know, the appointment of a hospitality specific minister. Do we expect to see one in the near future, and who might that be?
Well, I think one of the good things that's come out of COVID is that the government has recognised how diverse and varied hospitality is, how many government departments impact upon our sector, and the problems that you've got with the lack of cross-government coordination. So one of the first things they did actually was, as we slid into that panic, we've always had a tourism minister which has looked after hotels and inbound tourists, really, foreign tourist spend, our third largest export earner. What they did at the start of that crisis was to put in place a dedicated unit within the business department looking at hospitality specifically. And they gave the job of coordinating on hospitality to the High Street and Small Business Minister, who's Paul Scully, who's looking across retail as well. So actually, we've had 3 really excellent junior ministers who's worked with us in the business department, the tourism department, and Victoria Prentice is the third one in food. Nigel Huddleston, tourism, Paul Scully, effectively high streets, and Victoria Prentice in food supply. They've worked tirelessly along with us on a week to make sure that they're looking at our concerns. The key going forward is how do we maintain that? How do we keep that cross-government coordination going? And how do we make sure that we've got that strong voice?
Okay, so watch your space, I guess, in regards to that. And although
I think so. I think so. I mean, I think government recognises you need to have that cross-government coordination. It's a question of where's the top priority as you're coming out of the crisis. And obviously, it's about survival. It's about business viability. It's about reopening and recovery. Then we draw breath and we look at how do we build back resilience and how do we make sure that we've got a renaissance in hospitality, and we've got 3 excellent junior ministers working with us on that.
Fantastic to have that support. That's absolutely amazing. Actually, as I think of it, Kate, I was talking to Steve Alton back into last year, obviously from the BII, and I asked him about the One Voice collaboration with yourselves and with BBPA. Is there what's going on at the moment behind the scenes in regards to the One Voice collaboration?
Well, again, I mean, that's an area where it predates COVID, but it came into its own during COVID. It's broader than just those 3. So you've also got SEBA representing small independent brewers, CAMRA representing consumers, Pub is the hub. And really what we're trying to do with that is to make sure we've got coordination of message. One Voice is probably the wrong title for it. It's many voices, one message. Collaboration between the trade bodies designed to ensure that we don't have mixed messages going into government. We don't have that divide and conquer ability that government often uses against us. Identify the issues that we all agree on and can speak confidently with many voices making the same points, identical points. And then we take forward the areas that are different for our specific constituency. And it's been really effective means of sharing information, promoting a positive perception of the sector in the media, also in working around careers, still a huge challenge. So it's something that predates COVID, will continue after, and helps us to get our messages across.
I really like how you've explained that. So many voices, one message, which is the whole thought process behind the One Voice campaign with all the associations, which is incredibly strong as a message. In regards to okay, actually, let me think about this question, Kate. Sorry, what are the biggest things? It's probably a better way to put it, that the UK hospitality market should be looking forward to, in your opinion, and what are the biggest concerns from your viewpoint?
Well, I think looking forward, clearly it's about reopening. It's the ambition of getting back to doing what we do best, bringing our teams together, getting our staff off furlough, reopening, serving our customers. That's the heart of hospitality, giving people an everyday extra special experience, a bit of an everyday hug is what I always think about hospitality. It's a break from your normal life. I think looking forward to that pent up demand, that desire for experience and safe socializing, and being able to get customers back in. We know that experiential leisure was already in growth, and that was what customers were tapping into. I think concerns, the consumer confidence is going to be key, and value is going to be key. First of all, we've got to make sure that people feel safe, feel secure in our environment, and that they feel confident to come out and spend. After so much uncertainty, so many times they made plans and they were cancelled, I think consumers will be cautious. And then I think longer term, it's a bit like when you had that volcano that erupted and all the airlines were grounded, and you then found that you had the aeroplanes in the wrong place from the consumers. I think we're going to find that same thing again in the short term, and potentially a longer term trend. Our consumers are going to, we need to make sure that we're in the right place as our consumers at the right time. So, particularly for city centres, they are going to have to pivot quite a lot. Town and city centres, they're not going to have their normal commuters. They're not going to have their international tourists. They're not going to have the consumers coming in for a theatre or a show for a little bit of time. And then people, are going to go out in their neighbourhoods. So it's going to get a bit of time before we get the offer right with the people and everything working together. And I think the biggest concerns are around that hollowing out, the donut effect that we've seen in some of our major city centres, and particularly will people go back to the office in the way that they've done before, which causes a particular challenge. And then finally, from an operational perspective, the level of that our businesses are going to exit this crisis with. We've survived the Black Swan event of COVID, the ultimate Black Swan. You've got the grey rhinoceros of debt that is going to run alongside the industry for the next 18 months and could at any time trample us and frustrate the recovery. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night, really, is that level of debt, how long it's going to take to pay down, and what it means going forward.
Extremely well put. I think it's an incredibly thought-provoking in regards to the kind of the battle out of it, and an amazing analogy there, Kate. But I think there's a huge amount of tenacity, and I think the thing I just scribbled down actually was it's just working out those consumer trends as well. But there's definitely a demand there, which is a starting point at least. Is the UK hospitality, and actually, are you happy in general with the decisions that have happened throughout in regards to financial support to the industry over the last 12 months? And if so, Kate, what's good and what's not?
I think you'd have to be broadly content. As I say, we've had 14 financial statements, really, that would be considered to be budget statements over the last year, really, since the crisis hit. And at every single stage, hospitality, tourism, front and centre, major levels of support coming through, some innovative and creative solutions to give fiscal stimulus, to give support to the industry, to the businesses. Have we had good support? Undoubtedly, and I think it is unprecedented. Is it enough? No, it's never going to be enough, particularly that balance between the amount of revenue that's lost and the support that's coming in, that level of cash burn. And I think particularly the balance between debt and actual cash funding, cash compensation, and the balance between the whole economy approach that the Chancellor has taken versus the sector-specific need. Those are the areas that we haven't got quite right. So I think if you're looking at what was good and what's bad, or not bad, but less good, early on in the crisis, it was a very fast moving. I think we have to remember. I talked about 28th of January. 6th of March was when we had the first death, and people were still thinking that this would be something that you would ride out with a little bit of change. 16th of March, so 10 days later, you were telling people not to go to pubs and bars, and a week later you were closing down the entire economy, initially for 3 weeks and then for 3 months. I don't think anybody planning that could have anticipated that within that short period of time you would have had the comprehensive package of support about furlough. And I do remember working in those 2 weeks of maximum uncertainty between 16th of March and probably about 26th of March, where we really didn't know what was coming and what we were going to get, to get 100% rate relief, the grants that came through initially, furlough coming through to support our teams. Those were big transformational points. The problem then is later on, when the scale of the restrictions, the hit that was taken to cash flow and being cash flow negative, the grants never caught up. And really, since October last year, the level of sector specific hit has not been matched by support. And if you look at what's happened in Europe and in America, they are going to come out of this better as a hospitality sector there, because they're not going to have the same level of debt, because they haven't had the same cash burn. So in America, you've had huge priming of loans that have been translated to grants and just been written off. You've had compensation packages that are a percentage of lost revenue in parts of Europe. You've had a percentage of fixed costs in other parts of Europe that have gone through, and therefore those businesses are not going to be so heavily indebted as we have. And I think it's been, as we've gone through that crisis, second and third lockdowns, that's where we've had a real problem. The government has focused on funding employees, not shoring up business viability, and that's what the problem is. And a particularly punishing decision that I would highlight, many of our businesses in hospitality were really, they trusted what the Chancellor said to them in July. You stand by your people, you keep them on furlough, you bring them back to work, and in January, February, we will give you a furlough retention bonus. And the withdrawal of that had an impact on balance sheets and cash flow forecasts for our sector.
Yeah, I think there's been as a business owner, the few sides of reliefs, and also on the people side, to be able to sort of protect tech jobs in the business in regards to that timeline. I wasn't actually aware, Kate, about the system in America and having those loans written off, because it is a burden that many people are carrying, as you mentioned in the previous bit of this conversation. But we do have a roadmap. We have Boris's roadmap, and obviously we've had Rishi's budget. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the two are integrally linked, and I think the first thing to say is it was good to have them so close together, Previously, we've had announcements of restrictions or constraints on trading or lockdowns, and it's been a long time before we've seen the support coming alongside it. To have them just a week apart, still a week, but it was helpful to have that gap closed. They are really integrally linked. The budget and the compensation support that's in there only makes sense if the roadmap is stuck to. And it only makes sense if all of the trading restrictions on hospitality businesses fall away at the 21st of June. If they don't, if we slip on that timetable, if there's restrictions on or social distancing constraints in place after that, the budget support is totally inadequate, because the business rates bills in particular kick in from the 1st of July. So that budget, although you've got unprecedented support, all 4 areas that we asked the Chancellor for, we've got something in all those 4 areas: furlough extension, emergency grants extension, VAT lower rate extension, and business rate support holiday extension. All 4 of them extended. Not as far as we would have wanted, but it is quite unprecedented to get 4 things when you're in a budget negotiation. But the problem is you've got no headroom or breathing space for businesses to go back into cash flow positive, start to generate cash and be able to pay some of those extra costs, and particularly with the business rates. Yes, it's 100% for 3 months, and then it falls to 67% relief for the next 9 months. But for some of those smallest businesses, paying anything in July is going to be too big an ask when they've only just opened. And for the larger businesses, of course, that business rate support is capped, so they face having to pay their full bills. So for many businesses in our sector, they're going to have to prioritise paying their taxes rather than supporting their people and bringing more people back off furlough and into productive work. So I think, you know, both those documents really good, give us light at the end of the tunnel. They've got to be stuck to. We've got to end the restrictions, and I just question whether there's enough of a recovery period for our sector. The assumption seems to be that as soon as the restrictions end, we will bounce back really quickly, and we'll be able to be self-sufficient. You know, as long as those restrictions are in place, we don't break even. And even on the best projections, because of the level of debt and the servicing costs of that debt as we come out of this, it's going to be the end of 2022, early 2023 before we get back to pre-COVID levels of revenue. So just that slight caution that there's no headroom, no breathing space. And that's why I say, you know, that grey rhinoceros, which is the other analogy that comes through, over and above a black swan, it's still going to be there. It's going to be in our eye, tracking us for a long time. The recovery is going to be long and slow. And the final bit is that in all of that, the budget, the roadmap, the missing piece of the jigsaw is rent, and the rent debt that has built up in our sector over and above the loan debt, over and above the debt that we owe government for deferred VAT and PAYE. There is no solution through to get landlords and tenants resolving and sharing the pain on rent debt, and that's £2 billion in the hospitality sector alone. And at the moment, that's a can kicked down the road, and it's a bloodbath waiting to happen unless the government grasps the nettle and helps us to get a solution brokered with landlords and banks.
Wow, I did not realise, Kate, it was as high as 2 billion. That's quite shocking. I mean, I was chatting to Hayden Miser from Mullins, and you know, they've got a lot of freehold, and he said we're lucky because, you know, that rent is an absolute, you know, it's a strangler, and completely agree. And you know, it's tough for a lot of people. I think that uncertainty, so there's a lot of fingers crossed, and a lot of you know, resilience still needed, I think is probably fair to say. Kate, you are an incredibly busy lady, and I can't thank you enough for, 1, joining me, and 2, for everything that you and your team, and please do thank your team from us. So I'm going to say cheerio. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the other side.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. Thanks, Kate. Speak soon.
Bye.